Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm Joe Lissette. That's Matt Bamate. Now we're going to get those names changed. Thankfully, the new dashboard that we're using for champs is going to make that super quick, as you saw. So, yeah, really, really glad we got that change implemented. But yeah, I'm Brad Brown. That's Wyatt Darby. We are here for some more quarterfinal actions. We have our number 2 seed, Lewis Kaplan, versus our number 7 seed, Matt Hoey. Players are about ready at the table, but we want to talk about the format that they'll be playing and how we got there. These players are going to be playing Modern, which is going to be Lewis Kaplan on Dredge. He'll have the play versus Matt Hoey on Humans. Now, leading into the match, Hoey, being the lower seed, got the choice of a veto, and he chose to veto Pioneer, which would have been a blue-white control mirror. And I know there was a lot of discussion last night and early this morning, and that was the likely choice that Matt was going to make, primarily because Lewis had mentors in the side, and so game one, he had basically 5 or 6 cards that were better in the control mirror, and Pioneer was likely going to get banned. Also because Matt's Modern and Legacy deck, he seems to think that he's very favorable in both of those, especially in Legacy. I think we all agree, very favorable matchup, D&T versus Black-Green Depths. Modern, I think, is a little bit closer, but we are going to be playing some Modern. What do you make of that ban choice?
It makes a lot of sense. I think from Matt to pick Pioneer, which is like a coin flip kind of mirror match where my opponent has more sideboard tech. Let's get that out of here. The other 2 matches I am very happy to play. And I was actually kind of surprised to hear that until I looked at the particulars of Lewis Kaplan's Dredge deck. The big exclusion, no Blast Zone.
Yeah.
This was the card that I probably played Humans more than any other Modern deck in the past 2 or 3 years, and Blast Zone completely changed the dynamic. It stopped the Humans players from being able to sit on a battlefield full of Auriok champions. And because of that absence, Lewis is going to have to kind of lean on explosiveness and going around the card. And I think it's going to be pretty critical that our higher seed Lewis does win game 1, because those champions are going to be kind of nightmarish after that.
Yeah, funnily enough, I've seen some Bone Crusher Giants pop up in some dredge lists as well to combat the Auric champions on top of the Blast Zones. But yeah, pretty stock list for both players. Here's Matt Hoey's Humans list. The 3 Kitesail freebooters in the main, 1 Deputy of Detention, and then a bunch of Lords, plus the Meddling Mage and the Phantasmal Image. So nothing crazy going on. We've got these 2 Waterlogged Groves as well. But yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting dynamic post-board in Matt getting these 4 Auriok champions, and that's going to be a pretty hard card for Lewis to deal with. So we're going to jump down. Players are ready to go. We'll get right back into some Magic action for you. See you in just a second. All right, so again, Lewis is on the play. We'll see what kind of hand he starts. We'll also try to figure out what their mulligan decisions were, if they kept 7 or if anyone had to mulligan. Does not look like it. Okay. Matt is down to 6, we've been told.
Yeah, it looks like I do see a couple pretty powerful enablers from Lewis. He's playing the kind of replacement to Faithless Looting in Merchant of the Veil, having that access to the haggle part of it. And I believe there's a Cathartic Reunion available on turn 2. So without a 1-drop for Matt Hoey, which is a very big deal when you're mulliganing, you're looking for a 1. So without the early board presence, Lewis might just explode right out the gates, in a way that Humans can't really recover from.
Yeah, and he has that end of turn Merchant. Or, sorry, second main phase. That's a pretty common play pattern. Yep, good point.
Yeah, and the reason you do it that way is if you hit the combination of a Prized Amalgam and a Narcomoeba, the Amalgam would enter the battlefield and be able to attack on the next turn. So yeah, don't want to miss any damage, so type play there. And here we see another Dredge. Lewis is really looking for any way to get that Amalgam in play, and just like that, Blood Gas hits the bin.
So pretty explosive start for Lewis. Matt had no Vial, no 1-drop. So I'd be curious to see what Matt's next play is.
Yeah, I think to keep a hand without a 1-drop, you have to have a lot of the best disruptive elements. Things like Meddling Mage to name Conflagrate, or some of your best threats, Mantis Rider, just to avoid a lot of the ground game. And here we see a huge Cathartic Reunion starting probably what's going to be about Dredge 15 this turn.
And we do hit 1 Creeping Chill, but we still have some Dredgers to wrap up. There's a second Creeping Chill, another Prize Amalgam. Notable that the first Prize Amalgam trigger is still on the stack, or still is a delay trigger, and so the second Amalgam will come back from the first one. There's another Bloodghast and a Narcomoeba. So the Narcomoeba will also bring back the.
Yeah, and Lewis hits enough power off of that flipping the top quarter of his deck that Matt just knows he can't come back, and that's the game one that was critical to Lewis's chances.
Yeah, that's what we kind of talked about, where these Oriac champions are going to make it difficult for Lewis. If he can get game one, I think he's got a pretty good chance to win the match, and that was a very, very good start.
And it's a really excellent argument in favor of playing very linear decks. It doesn't really matter how good the reaction can be from my opponent if I have the potential to produce these unbeatable starts. So yeah, why don't we take a look at Matt's sideboard as he is on the play? And there's the it's highlighted by the card that we really do think is going to define these post-war games, and that's the full playset of Auriok Champion. Filling out the sideboard, though, we see 2 Collector Oofs, one of Gaddock Teague, Deputy of Detention, Cambal, Knight of Autumn, Plague Engineer, and then 2 copies of Dismember and Damping Sphere. So I do think that the Plague Engineer is excellent. It can shut down Narcomoebas or Bloodghasts and really minimize the creature angle from Dredge. And I actually could see Deputy of Detention to do kind of a similar purpose here.
Yeah, I think all 6 of those cards will come in, and I think the the freebooters are likely the first cut out of the deck. So we'll see what other cards he wants to cut. Thalia, Guardian of the Thraben, is also not at its best in this matchup. Sometimes on the play you can land an early one, and maybe they have to delay a Cathartic Reunion for a turn, but it doesn't come up very often.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that Freebooter is going to be prioritized over Thalia because of its ability to snipe Cathartic Reunion when playing first, and just the fact that it does have some evasion to chip in the final points of damage, because humans might be able to be the aggressor this game by virtue of being on the play.
Sure, absolutely. So we're gonna pull up Lewis's sideboard here for you guys. We've got 1 Dark Blast, 3 Lightning Axe, 4 Claim, 3 Thoughtseize, 1 Abrupt Decay, 2 Ancient Grudge, and 1 Leyline of the Void. What do you think Lewis is bringing in here?
I think I just like all the removal spells. Dark Blast, Lightning Axe, and Abrupt Decay. Many different names to make Meddling Mage locks pretty difficult to achieve. And, it's just really everything that Lewis has to worry about is a creature that can be attacked. So I think he's going to lean into that pretty heavily. Dredge tends to be a deck that sideboards by means of shaving and not doing any fundamental changes. So you might see a few fewer Shriek Horns and so on, just to have this really diverse and excellent interaction.
So I was talking to Lewis a little bit before this, and he said he had come up with a pretty good sideboard plan. I didn't ask him specifics because his opponent was standing right there, but I think Thoughtseize is going to come in on the draw. And the primary reason here is it's one of the ways you can snag that turn 2 Auriok Champion. I don't want it on the play, I don't think. Maybe you still want it just because that card is so good against you. But this is one of the few ways he can actually interact with that Auriok Champion. And I'm thinking Thoughtseize is probably a reasonable include.
Yeah, I think that is very sensible. And the frustration with Auriok Champion is once the first one is on the battlefield, then the possibility of Phantasmal Image being incredible against you kind of is opened up.
Right.
So yeah, Thoughtseize might just be a necessary preventative measure, because the way these post-war games play out is pretty vastly different. Auriok Champion, especially in multiples, has a potential to stall the Dredge player out to the point of decking. And for that to happen, Meddling Mage has to be locking down Conflagrate. So there's lots of layers going on here. Lewis will want to be able to kill the Meddling Mage and get ahead of the champion or deny it with Thoughtseize. And that actually makes it, a pretty kind of Lewis almost sideboarding into a control deck if he opts down the Thoughtseize route as well.
Yeah, and again, notable, there is no Blast Zone in Lewis's 75. Otherwise, I think, that would probably be the best card for him to have in this matchup, post-board at least. Or one of the best, for sure. So let's pull up Lewis's player profile slide here, learn a little bit more. We'll get to it when we can. Our director. All right. See, that wasn't too long. Age 33. He's a software developer / cat photographer. Always posts his pictures of cats or of his cat on Twitter. I always see them. Hometown, Madison, Wisconsin. A lot of Madison players here this weekend. Qualified, squeaked in at that 8th at-large spot. 2 NRG CT top 8s, 0 wins so far in 1-5 versus the field. That might be the lowest record versus the field I've seen this weekend. Does have a top 8 at GP Detroit, multiple Pro Tour appearances, loves hanging out with his cats, Moxie and Pepper. Favorite board game is Terra Mystica, and favorite pump-up song is Pony by Genuine? Genuine. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and, I think Lewis was definitely one of the pre-tournament favorites. I know I'm not supposed to be biased, but it was pretty awesome to be able to carry Lewis to this event by virtue of our performance in the last team tournament. And yeah, not surprised to see him take it home, but I am kind of surprised to see his deck choices. I think Dredge was a really kind of bold choice for Modern.
Yeah, for sure. Might have just expected not too much graveyard hate. Maybe he can just kind of squeak in with an off the wall choice. Learn a little bit about Matt here. He is 28 years old. He's an account manager from Kenosha, Wisconsin. He was our 2018 and 2017 champion. He has 9 CT top 8s, 3 wins, 3 and 5 versus the field. He was a GP Indy team finalist with Joseph Bernal and Andrew Tenjum. Those guys love to team together. You see them everywhere. Enjoys poker and corgi watching outside of Magic. His favorite sandwich is a club sandwich with all the meat. And his frequently used emoji is the upside down smiley face. That's one I don't think I've ever used in my life.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure the right situation for it. It's not quite as obvious as some of the other ones that I see, but yeah, I think that Matt Hoey is the level of dominance he's had over this series is kind of unreal. The fact that he is still very much alive to be a 3-time consecutive champion, that's fantastic. And I think Matt Hoey is another one of the stalwarts and people that he's down to game right now, but I would not be surprised if he's able to rattle off this and then 2 more matches.
Yeah, this it's always been surprising to me how well he can play Magic, and he really, just depending on how much he cares about the event. Sometimes you just play for fun, or you always want to win, but like an event like this where you really prepare and you're really thinking about all of the different lines and variations and even the band strategies and stuff and how it's going to play out. I think Matt does a pretty good job when he's put in those types of situations. Looks like Matt is thinking about a mulligan to 6. Might be thinking about what card to put back or if he should go to 5. And Lewis did have those thought seizes. I do see one in his opening hand, and he did keep 7. So if that was Lewis's sideboard strategy, it looks like it might pay out.
Yeah, it looks like we did get some spotting where Lewis didn't actually board in all of his thought seizes. So the fact that he was able to snipe it on turn 1, and yeah, that's why you board in just the first couple, to have it immediately, and it looks pretty powerful here. It'll at least be able to give him some insurance that if Matt's keeping a hand based off the strength of an Auriac champion, that it won't hit the table right away. And I think for Matt to be in the tank, we see multiple Mantis Riders, and looks like it might have been a all clock no interaction hand, and Matt decides to take advantage of the London Mulligan. When Auriac champion matters as much as it does, I think it's completely respectable to dig for it very aggressively.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a no vial hand or he had just a vial and a land. Maybe that was going to be too slow. We'll have to see if he see if we can get a better 5 here, right? It's going to 5. Yeah. So thinking about Lewis's list a little bit, and we kind of talked about cuts. We heard from our director who was watching that Bloodghast was a couple of Bloodghasts were taken out, and that makes a lot of sense if you're expecting that Plague Engineer to come in. A lot of these 1 toughness creatures just tend to fall by the wayside to Plague Engineer.
Yeah, and they do play pretty poorly into the champions, kind of rendered completely irrelevant by them. Bringing creatures back against the gain life, end of the battlefield trigger is rough, and I really do like the way Lewis's hand sequences out here. He does have Forgotten Cave, which coming into play tapped can be awkward, but a turn 1 Thoughtseize can be followed by a Shriekhorn to make sure he's using his mana effectively, interacting in a relevant time frame, and the multiple Cathartic Reunions kind of gives him the burst he needs to catch up from playing kind of a slower to develop first 2 turns.
Okay, so I do see, I think I saw a Vial, a Gaddock Teague, a Thalia. I think he's trying to decide what card to keep last here. So he might ship back this Gaddock Teague because he has a Thalia.
Yeah, Gaddock is difficult to actually cast. I think it is incredibly underrated how having non-humans that are multiple like colors are really only realistic if you have Aether Vial or like multiple Ancient Ziggurats. So yeah, Gaddock though bordered it I think mostly against its strength, against the card Conflagrate.
Yep.
So that makes a lot of sense. But we do see it shipped here, and looks like there is an Aether Vial. So kind of interesting choice to eschew the Gaddock and with that kind of ability to put it into play.
Right. He looks like he opted to keep cards that were going to increase his power and toughness on the battlefield. So we see keeping Athalia's Lieutenant and Athalia. Maybe if he can build like a 3-power first striker, that's going to be really hard for Lewis to get through. And maybe he just has to hope that those conflagrates, Lewis can't find one.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to keep the Thalia. You can play it in a time that would kind of preempt a Cathartic Reunion. Unfortunately, not after it gets Thoughtseize. So really far from ideal play of a 1/1 Lieutenant because Hoy just needs to have some pressure on the battlefield, and it's kind of meager right now, but it's a card that does scale up reasonably well with another Thalia's Lieutenant in his hand, and actually
And Athalia.
yeah, excellent draws after the Thoughtseize.
And Lewis has a Cathartic Reunion as well, so this is going to slow him down. So that was a fantastic draw on Matt's side.
Yeah, and the really kind of classic and heads-up human play of casting Lieutenant, putting his trigger on the stack, and then vialing in my Thalia, kind of maximizing his counters and pressure here. So yeah, Lewis is under the gun, unable to cast a Reunion, I believe, without a third land in his hand. So this next draw step might just be the game here.
He's probably thinking, do I need to just take a draw? He has no green source for this Life of the Loam. Like, he would still need a third land in that case as well. He can certainly mill with a Shriekhorn and see what happens, but he might need to try to draw for a land.
Yeah, I think milling for full information is very reasonable, but yeah, I can't really see a way for him to win without a third mana source. So normally the limit is 2, to cast your Loams and Reunions, but Thalia completely upsets that equation, and yeah, and the thing is the pressure is such that Lewis will only get one turn past this.
And there was a land on top. Does he find a land? He does. He has a third land. There is no treasures in the graveyard at the moment, and I don't believe he has one in hand either.
I think there's the Life from the Loam is
Okay,
the
sure.
dredge engine, but it's
a very small dredge. He would have to kind of hit the perfects to make the rest of the reunion do enough, right?
Yeah, and I could see this Cathartic pitching the Conflagrate and that Loam, potentially, being able to get the Conflagrate in the graveyard without having to invest any mana to get it there. And we'll see. The question is Lewis going to take a 3-point fetch? It looks like he will, and that is going to leave him exposed to. Are we facing down lethal on the board with that?
It looks
fetch,
like
right?
it's 9, right? 4, 6, 9 damage.
Yeah, so that's kind of putting himself in a spot where there has to be a Creeping Chill or some interaction, like blocking with an Archamoeba off the top of this dredge.
And my opponent not discarding a Stinkweed Imp here is a really big deal.
And that's it.
So now we have to draw 2, and I think that's game.
Yeah, missing on another Dredger stops the chain, and Narcomoeba immediately in the next 2. And yeah, Lewis packs it in after a very quick second game.
Wow. That Thalia was so pivotal on Matt's side. That's insane. Yeah, absolutely insane Mold of 5.
Yeah, and not just the Thalia, the Lieutenant too. He had the exactly enough interaction, exactly enough pressure, and having a functional turn 4 lethal after the double mulligan and the Thoughtseize was, that was an incredible comeback from what the game looked like on the first turn.
Yeah, absolutely insane. And if you think about it, he bottomed a Kitesail Freebooter and a Gaddock, both cards that interact with Lewis's hand, and chose to basically just put as much power on the board as he could on the play. That thought having the Aether Vial on 1 allowed him to play 2 spells a turn on turn 3. And that's crazy. Even through a Thoughtseize, I'm very, very surprised that was the outcome of that game. And now we get to move on to a game 3.
Yeah, Thoughtseize definitely powerful, but so is the Thoughtseize bug, and we kind of saw that last game. Thalia discarded, Thalia immediately drawn, and yeah, that's that was kind of wild. Lewis will be on the play for this last game, which means the impact of a Thalia attacks is going to be significantly weakened, and so will Kitesail Freebooter. So we'll see how that changes the dynamic, how that maybe opens Lewis up to maybe be too explosive to lose to an Auriok champion if there's just the one copy.
Right. While we wait for these players to shuffle up and figure out if they want to make any sideboard changes. Let's talk about next year. So our first Sorry about that, guys. We did not add audio to that slide. So basically, what we're trying to say, though, is that we do have Legacy. I know SCG dropped their Legacy support next year. So if you do want to support that format, come on out to our $10,000 weekend in January. And yeah, it'll be at the NRG Water Park as well. So bring out the family. We usually have really good room rates. Those rooms fit up to, I think, 6 people. So should be a good time.
And there's not really a more iconic duo than Magic players and, well, being 6 deep in a hotel room, I think, at least
Yeah.
at least in my experience. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I think I really am excited to play more Modern with the Urza, Icewing, Quaddle, Charm deck. That's been unbelievable, and we'll might see that later today in the hands of Sam Black. And yeah, the Legacy is actually looking pretty wide open post-Ren ban, so that's another one where I'm looking forward to kind of dive deeper into that.
I was very excited about that band personally. I love to watch Death in Texas play. I love to play it, and that was a deck that was pretty much pushed out of the format. You could still play it, like Giver of Runes was a card, but it's just so much worse than Mother of Runes and a lot of other matchups. But I'm glad to see that card go. So we'll jump back down to the table, and Lewis is on a Multi 6, just trying to decide what card to put back. It looks like.
Yeah, and I think Dredge is one of the most satisfying decks to London Mulligan with when you get to put Creeping Chills and Narcomoebas back in your deck, before you immediately crack a fetch land to start the game. And looks like Lewis's hand is kind of perfect. Lightning Axe and Cathartic Union with Dredgers mean he has the interaction and he has the explosiveness covered.
Yeah, now Matt did just pick up a copy of Auric Champion for the turn, so that will come down next turn, and if he has a 1-drop to go along with it, he can immediately start getting life with this Aether Vial. And he looks like he does have the 1-drop, and he has a Phantasmal Image.
Oh, wow. So this is kind of both players firing on all cylinders, really. And I have to see how much power Lewis is able to put into play on turn 2, because we saw this sequence prompt a concession from Hoey in the first game.
With Game 3 on the line, I don't think we'll see that again, but it is very likely for him to put a bunch of power into play off a Cathartic Reunion. So his first dredge was a Stinkweed Imp, which was mostly a brick. He did mill over some life from the loans, now 3 of them. There's another Stinkweed Imp. So really just a Creeping Chill, the only hit so far. Much slower start than game 1. There's another Stinkweed Imp. And no power makes it to the board.
Wow, yeah, no relevant creatures is about as bad as that could be for Lewis, because I mean, Creeping Chill, the life is nice, but it's not particularly impactful, and he kind of needs these runaway starts because Auric Champion is going to do a ton of work when it comes to undoing any incidental life loss that is going to be inflicted onto Matt.
So 15 cards were milled over, and we didn't hit a single creature to bring back to the battlefield. That is pretty low variance, or high variance, I guess. Yeah, pretty high variance.
Yeah, it's tough, but it is the downside of cutting on your creature, game 1 package to find more interaction. You definitely lose some of your explosiveness, and here we do see the Auric Champion hit. It's ready to be copied next turn, and I actually see a second natural champion in hand. So this is absolutely one of those games where Lewis just might not be capable of dealing enough damage fast enough.
I think if Lewis had put a bunch of power on the board, we would have seen the champion come down after the 1-mana champion come down after the Auric Champion. And I think Matt held on to it just so he can get more triggers off of it because Lewis didn't have any power in play.
Yeah, kind of allowed Matt to change his priorities. And here we see Lewis kind of just, accruing a little bit of value. Forgotten Cave plus Life from the Loam is going to give him a lot of chances to continue to dredge, continue to find those prized amalgams and the other, actual kind of bits of power in his deck. But it's going to take a while, and it's giving, the humans player, Matt Hoey, ample time to set up.
Yeah, Lewis is not out of this yet, but he does need to kind of get a move on with these creatures. See what he can muster up this turn. All right, so we are going to put the 1-mana Champion of the Parish into play. Gain a life. Matt Hoey, not a kind of guy who's going to miss out on his triggers. I think he has another champion and a Phantasmal Image, actually.
Yeah, this turn is going to be 3 deep on Auriok champions while also setting up a champion of the parish to actually, pretty sizable power and toughness, and it's just kind of perfect because once the first champion is down, there's no way to stop Phantasmal Image from making another Auriok champion.
So gain 1 life plus the counter. And now we have a land into a Mantis Rider, gain 2 life. And Matt might decide to just copy the Mantis Rider and get this game closed out rather than going for the 3rd Auriok champion, but I assume it'll just kind of depend on what Lewis can put onto the board next turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the clock from Mantis Rider, it's really nice to keep the flexibility of Phantasmal Image in your back pocket for as long as possible. And, Lewis is kind of floundering right now, so I think maximizing pressure makes a lot of sense. Really, the only thing, did Lewis even find a Conflagrate off of the Dredge, 14 turn?
It does look like there's one, but it is hard to tell.
Yeah, and it looks like Lewis is going to use the interaction he does have in his hand, getting rid of a Stinkweed Imp, clearing the Champion of the Parish because that has the highest potential damage output, because of the lack of blockers Lewis is presenting. And, 4 damage isn't quite as bad. We'll see what this next set of Dredges yields.
Stinkweed Imp, something like that, could block the Mantis Rider, and that does have Death Touch or Pseudo Death Touch. So that might be a line he can take further on down the road. But we are kind of getting out of hand here. Let's see what Lewis decides. Going to dredge Life from the Loam. There is a Bloodghast plus another Lightning Axe. So if we can find some amalgams before we trigger this Bloodghast back into play, might be a place to start.
Yeah, it's going to depend on what role Lewis wants to take. He could cycle Forgotten Caves to really explode into the graveyard, or he could take a more defensive posture, trying instead to hardcast Stinkweed Imps. But instead we see a cycle and a dredge, and here's some action. A crippling chill. Yep. Narcomoeba and Prized Amalgam is going to represent a battlefield presence and, a little bit of kind of reprieve in the life totals too.
And I believe there is a Conflagrate. I'm pretty sure I see a red XX spell, which means he could pitch 3 cards and take out this Mantis Rider, potentially. I don't know that that's very good yet. He might wait until the battlefield is a little bit more full.
Yeah, it's very sensible to hold the Conflagrate as long as you can while you have the Loam engine going to maximize the damage output that you can deal with it. And here we see another Dredge 5 hitting another Chill and Narcomoeba.
So he did bring in all 3 Thoughtseizes. All 3 of them have been milled over. All right. But every one of these Narcomoeba is gaining Matt 2 life. And here comes back that Bloodghast.
Yeah, and you can see just the power of the double champion. Even though 3 chills have been milled over this game, Hoey is, above his starting life total. There isn't really a board from Dredge that's capable of attacking and pressuring that. And the Conflagrate, it can't be expected to deal enough burn to actually close the game when the life totals are just, they're actually skyrocketing for our humans player here. And, more importantly than just stalling the game, we also see a flying clock. There's only so many Narcomoebas floating around, and there isn't really, Lewis just can't pivot into a control plan all that effectively. He's mostly going to be limited by the size of his deck this game, too, because he's stretched a lot. There's no kind of end of the game in sight, and I don't know exactly how he kind of fixes the slow development of his battlefield.
Lewis has 7 cards in hand, so I think Phantasmal Image is likely going to copy another champion instead of a Mantis Rider. If he copies the Mantis Rider, the Conflagrate is just a clean answer to it. It only needs to actually do 1 damage. So, yep, we'll see that copy, gain 2 life. And now every creature hitting the battlefield is 3 life for Matt. That's going to be really hard to get through.
Yeah, because the champion of the parish was killed last turn, copying Mantis Rider to push damage, not exactly the plan for Hoey. So he's just all in on stacking Auriok champions as deep as he can, and right now it seems to be working flawlessly.
And do you think we'll see Matt win by damage, or do we think we'll see Lewis mill out this game?
I actually think Lewis milling out is my prediction for how this one's going to end, and we'll have to see, though. I mean, the thing is, there's just the no blast zone is critical here.
Right.
I genuinely thought that humans, it was a close matchup pre-war the Spark, but post-war it just felt like you just couldn't play humans into this. But Lewis made the choice to have an extra Forgotten Cave for more explosiveness over the reactive blast zone.
Yeah.
And he's kind of paying for it here.
Yep. I mean, this was our only humans player in the tournament, I believe. I can double check that actually real quick. Yes. So, I mean, certainly Blast Zone has, more than just X equals 2 on it. So you can play it in many different matchups, like Infect X is 1, for example. But there's definitely a choice to be made there, and like you said, it is hurting him a bit.
Yeah, and we can actually see how cognizant Lewis is of his dwindling library, doing a quick count here before deciding exactly what these Forgotten Caves are going to be dredging up in his main phase here.
With 2 Conflags, is there any way that he can somehow squeak out 25, 26 points of damage with just 2 Conflags? Seems unlikely.
Yeah, that would take us... Like, what's the maximum number of cards you can get in your hand with Life from the Loam? Let's say you get up to 6 mana, cast 2 Loams in the same turn, and then discard your entire hand to Conflagrate. That's something in the neighborhood of 12, 13 points of burn. That's... Hoey would have to not gain any life, and Lewis would have to do that twice before he decks.
Right.
And that just seems like that's too many moving pieces coming together with these champions triggering over and over and over.
It looks
again.
like we're conflagging for at most 10 damage this turn. Yeah, looks like all 10. So we're going to do 3 to the Mantis Rider and 7 to Matt. Now, if Matt... So the Narcomoebas get in for 2, or at least so we thought. Here comes a Kite Sail. Gain 3 and block. That's probably not a card Lewis was hoping to see there.
Yeah, and I still very much respect the attack from Lewis. Being in a position where you don't really think you can play around anything, like you just have to run it. The odds of getting ambushed aren't super high, and you're going to have a difficult time winning through actual anything here. So we see Matt digging for action, cracking that Horizon Canopy, and finding a couple lands in a row. It's just he kind of has the luxury to miss a few consecutive draw steps here. We'll see if we get any champion attacks. It looks like it might be kind of safe to send 1, but instead, kind of understanding his role and his game plan is to just play defense, and he actually keeps everything at home.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself that maybe Lewis can get out of this by conflagging a couple times and then flying over with these Narcomoebas, but and then hoping that Matt can't draw a creature for a few turns because he's got lands and some Aether Vials in his deck. And so far he's drawing lands, but that Kitesail Freebooter was a really big deal because now the Narcomoeba that's already on the table can't get in for a point of damage this turn either, unless Lewis can manage to scrape together another huge Conflagrate.
Yeah, and remember, Matt Hoey is also drawing to Meddling Mage in the meantime. So, finding that before the second Conflagrate can be dredged over is a big deal. And not exactly sure what spread of removal spells Lewis has milled over. Remember, he did board in some Decays, Axe, and Dark Blasts. So
Right.
Here we see Lewis is down to 15 cards in library and dredging a Stinkweed Imp. So that's getting himself dangerously low.
He's down to 10. There is a Dark Blast, but that's certainly not enough. All right, we're going to dredge another 3. There are some creeping... I think there's 1 or 2 creeping chills left in the library as well. I believe we put one at the bottom, right?
Yeah, but there's been, I think, a shuffle since then.
Yeah,
So that might have be back in circulation by now.
Sure.
And now here we see some amalgams in the bottom 15, exactly where you don't want to see them. And this sequence is gaining Matt Hoey, 12 life?
Yes.
And he still has blockers for all of the amalgams if he absolutely needs it. So, yeah, just a few turns too late for Lewis. The attacks, I just don't know if they'll be able to come in fast enough.
So there's a Noble Hierarch that gains 4 and does block 3 damage. Yeah. Going to be a lot of turning cards sideways, I think, this turn for Lewis. Doesn't have to really worry about a swing from Matt on the crackback either. He's still at a healthy 21 life.
Yeah, Matt kind of made that known by the no attack several turns ago when it seemed safe to get in with some of the champions. And here we can see Lewis playing his deck. Yeah, should be down to 7, and I mean, if you dredge alone, that's basically just your last dredge for the remainder of the game. And I don't think you can touch any cards that demand you bidding more than 3.
The question is, did he board out a conflag? So we've seen one, and we haven't seen the other one yet. And I don't think he has one in hand.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's just a little bit of kind of unfortunate variance for where it was put in the library. The card is just it can be interacted with by humans, but it is just so brutally efficient when you do get to cast it on, say, turn 4 of the game and wipe the humans player's board. So I think Lewis might go digging for it to try and remove the non-champion creatures, and just like that, there it is.
That Narcomoeba is going to come back and gain 3. I think they're going to see if it is a May or not. Lewis thinking, do I actually want to gain Matt 3 life? And there's a very good reason to not want to do that if there's only 4 cards left in the library. He's got 4 turns, potentially, to end this game. Looks like we are going to do that. I would assume we're going to see a conflag for at least 3 this turn to get those 2 blockers out of the way. And that would allow Lewis to get in, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 damage this turn if he can get the Kai'Sail Freebooter and the Hierarch out of the way.
Yeah, and Lewis just doing some math, deciding that, I will just take draw steps for the rest of the game if my opponent has no flying blockers. This Narcomoeba will deal for, a little bit more than the life it's gaining my opponent. So I think that's fair, and we do see the turn start off with an attack here with everything except the Narcomoeba that we're running into the Freebooter wall.
Now let's assume Lewis just draws a card every turn. So he's going to draw 4 more cards, and then he can conflag. I think he has 2 cards in hand, so he'll have 6 points of conflag damage to end the game with on his very last turn. If he used it, I think he has 3 cards in hand, so he'd have 7. Okay, so if he used it this turn to remove the 2 blockers, right? It's going to be dependent on whether Matt blocks or not with these creatures, but if the Narcomoeba's got in, that's 8 points of damage over the course of 4 turns, 5 turns technically. So it's actually more damage if he were to conflag this turn than wait. But we'll see. I guess the life alone changes that math a little bit as well.
And here do we see Matt Hoey actually decline to block anything, even the Bloodghasts not getting touched by Auric Champion, and that's interesting. I
think he blocked 3 prize amalgams with Auric Champions.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So he saves 9, and he knows about Life of the Lum in Lewis's hand. That's likely going to get lands back. So there's not a ton of value blocking those.
Yeah, hard to see when the creatures don't get moved around. But yeah, it looks like Matt Hoey is kind of going into just maximum damage prevention mode. And we see Lewis cast double Life from the Loam, just trying to max out the size of the Conflagrate as soon as he's able to cast it. And no creatures for Hoey. He's bricked on, I believe, 3 of the last 4 draw steps.
Yeah, and it will be interesting because Matt chose not to block anything last turn, and he might not get a chance to block with these creatures next turn now.
Yeah, the Noble Hierarch and Kitesail Freebooter are definitely living on borrowed time in the face of that Conflagrate. So it might be a situation where if you know they're going to die, you just want to take the value when you can get it. But that is kind of a tough call. There is some reasons to leave them in play. Say if you found Athal's Lieutenant, an extra point of toughness on those would make them much more difficult to clear with Conflagrate, and likely a situation where he's just kind of debating, the upsides of various draws and how much he cares about Lewis redirecting some Conflagrate damage.
All right, can Lewis deal 29 points of damage? Now, one thing to note, though, about blocking the Bloodghasts is every time they come back, he gains 3.
Right, and that's kind of why I was surprised not to see that, because once the Bloodghasts go in the graveyard, they're almost not really worth bringing back at all. So you do kind of remove their repeated damage by having them be attacking and unblocked for several turns.
So we'll see if Lewis can find a window here. It almost feels like there is a chance. He's kind of separating these out, thinking that the 3 amalgams will be blocked. And, if he can flags, he'll do what, 7, 8, 9 damage plus any leftover from the 3 that's going to target the 2 blockers he can remove. And I think he has like 8 or 9 cards in hand, so that's another 6 damage.
Yeah, I think the math might be looking that if Lewis conflagrates Hierarch and Freebooter and Matt Hoey cannot find a creature in the next 3 turns, Lewis might be dealing very close to exactly lethal. So here we see conflagrate for, I think, 8 cards after the draw step and the double loam. And yeah, this is Lewis kind of moving in and kind of using his last big burst of damage for the entire game.
All right, there it is. There's the last conflag. It does look like Matt is going to need to draw a creature. All right, so get life totals updated here in a second.
Yeah, we see 9 damage coming through, and I believe that was 5 from Conflagrate. So, yeah, Matt Hoey is on the ropes, and it's wild how much a single creature does to completely destroy this race, but he has to find one, and even though his deck is 30 creatures, it's no guarantee.
There's a Kitetail Freebooter that blocks Narcomoeba and gains him 3. That might be enough.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, one of the less good creatures you could draw, but just anything does it. And no need for him to, put it on the battlefield right away. Aethervaw is going to allow him to conceal that information and potentially snipe Lewis's draw step here.
Oh, I love this play because if Lewis drew Creeping Chill, he won't be able to cast it.
Right, and Creeping Chill is one of these last remaining 3 cards.
We think. Yeah. Now, he could have boarded out some number, but I think Matt's appropriately playing around the possibility of Lewis drawing Creeping Chill that turn. So this looks like an attack for 8 damage if Lewis was to ship everything in. That'll take Matt to 10. And the next turn he can do 7 damage. It's this is really close. I'm still kind of wondering if he can block these Blood Guests this turn. He'll take an extra 2 points of damage, and that would drop him to 8. But then these Blood Guests don't get to attack next turn unless they gain Matt another 6.
Right, and I think that it's unfortunate that blocking the Bloodghast does get worse and worse the later you do it because the damage they've done previous turns, can't be undone. But at some point, you might just need to rip the Band-Aid and decide that just permanently removing them is the priority. And it's possible that Matt Hoey takes enough damage that the Bloodghast could be returned with haste later, and that complicates things. Although, it's just hard to bring the Bloodghast back with the triple champion in play.
Right. Now, if there is a Creeping Chill, Lewis has the potential of, cycling this land and drawing Creeping Chill and, not using it as a dredge. So I think he's trying to do math, too. What happens if I just cycle this card and cut myself off from a turn so that Matt has less chances to draw another creature? I think that's kind of what Lewis is thinking about right now. Should I go for this line? I have 2 cards left in my deck. I believe one of them's Creeping Chill.
And here we see a triple or a block on 3 amalgams again. Lewis deciding, I think that the cycle for Creeping Chill play should be an option available to him next turn as well. So just kind of sitting on that
no. Oh no.
That Phantasmal Image is huge. That's an extra 3 points of life and a 4th Auriok champion to block all of the amalgams. That has to, I think, seal it up for Matt Hoey.
And there's a Lightning Axe that can get rid of the Kitesail Freebooter. And now that last card is probably the Creeping Chill. And we're going to bring in Phantasmal Image. Gain 3. Matt will go to 14. Block the amalgams and take 6 points of damage. And we know, though, that, okay, he drew a creature. And that's probably lights out. Let's say he bricked on a creature he was at 8. And Lewis draws, I think where he's drawing Creeping Chill. Nope, doesn't look like it. It was a Narcomoeba. So Matt is going to win with Lewis milling out. It ended like he thought.
Yeah, absolutely wild game, and just kind of, it really looked like Matt had everything he needed to lock the game up, and then he almost died 7 turns later.
Right.
It was pretty incredible. I think Lewis got a bit unfortunate with where the amalgams were, but incredibly noble effort to do his best to set up those lines to lethal. So yeah, I think really well played by both players, and yeah, Matt Hoey kind of squeaking it out, not having to worry about a blast zone, and those sideboard champions absolutely carrying the day.
Yeah, insane match. Just super excited to watch that, and congratulations to Matt. Moving on, still has the chance to become the 2019 champion and that would be his third championship win in a row. And it's a tough field. He's got Sam Black, Lewis Kaplan. There's so many good players in this top 8. We'll see if Matt can squeak out that win in the next semifinals as well.
Yeah, and he'll have to actually go through Sam Black to get to the finals.
Yes.
So really exciting to watch that particular match, and we can take a look at the top 8 bracket and see where our next couple matches of the day are going to go. Looks like we are heading into our final quarterfinals between Evan Gascon and Ray Huang. And it's interesting. They're actually driving to the event together here today. And now, Brad, what match do you think we'll end up seeing from these two players?
So Ray has the choice, and I did see him play Blue-White versus Lotus Field, but I don't know how it panned out. I expect that he will likely ban Modern because Infect has a good Bant Snow matchup, I believe. And then Evan will either choose Death and Taxes versus Control, which is a super close matchup, or this Lotus Field versus Blue-White Control. So to me, I've seen him play the Lotus Field deck, and it's had enough of a fail rate this weekend that he might shy away from Pioneer, and I'm likely going to assume we play Legacy.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Evan is someone who's talked to me a lot about how comfortable he is playing Death and Taxes. He does, it goes to his weekly Legacy tournament basically every week, and has a list that was actually looking excellent this weekend. 3 copies of Cataclysm, just dominating the fair matchups I was able to watch him play.
Yep. So Joe and Matt will be back in the booth for the final quarterfinal matchup, and then we'll be able to move on to our semifinals. We'll let them discuss a little bit more of the breakdown of that matchup and how it's going to play out, what those bands look like, and what format they're going to play. And we will be back in just a few minutes with you guys. We'll see you soon.